Shit, I was muted. Well, let's get it rocking, man. So, another live stream. Make sure to follow me on Twitch, TikTok, and on YouTube at Life of a Champ Podcast and everything. Um, if there's any specific video that I'm going to go ahead and react to or a creator that I'm going to go ahead and react to, let me know for sure. And yeah, this is Chris Williamson's 800th episode, so hopefully he's going to be spinning some game as he usually does. And yeah, just follow me on Twitch, TikTok, and on YouTube at Life of a Champ Podcast on every single platform, as well as make sure you go ahead and leave a like on my YouTube shorts, as well as my YouTube clips. I've been posting a lot more frequently on there, so there should be some entertaining content for sure. Let's get it.
Is the 800th episode of Modern Wisdom, and as is tradition, I'm going to go through some of the best lessons that I've learned over the last 100 episodes. Some of it is stuff from my newsletter, some of it's things that I've learned from guests on the show, and other bits are just random insights I've encountered in life. So, yeah, let's get into it. The first one, productivity debt. I adore this idea. So when Matthew Hussey came on the show, he has this quote from his book Love Life, where he's talking about how he is a internal tyrant. And he says, I struggle to believe I'm worthy of moments of joy and peace without first putting myself through a brutal schedule, monitoring my productivity levels down to the minute. Perhaps some people apply this earn your cookie mindset in ways that lead to healthy achievements. Not me. Mine is a mutation whereby joy and self-compassion are regularly outlawed by an internal tyrant who decides when I've been flogged enough for one day. Just when I'm about to collapse, a voice inside says, okay, give him half an hour of peace before bed, but make sure he knows we'll start again, bright and early in the morning. And this insight hurts my soul, largely because I see it in myself. And Oliver Berkman, who wrote 4,000 Weeks, has a name for this bottomless pit of self-imposed expected efficiency, productivity debt. He says that many people, by which he meant him, seem to feel as if they start each day off in the morning with a kind of productivity debt, which they must struggle to pay off throughout the day in hopes of reaching a zero balance by the time the evening comes around. He said that few things felt more basic to his experience of adulthood than this vague sense that he's falling behind and need to claw his way back up to some minimum standard of output. It's as if he needs to justify his existence by staying on top of things in order to stave off some ill-defined catastrophe that might otherwise come crashing down upon his head, which is why he is such an enthusiastic proponent of keeping a done list, which starts empty first thing in the morning, and then you gradually fill it with whatever you accomplish throughout the day. And his argument is that each entry is a cheering reminder that you could have, after all, spent the day doing nothing constructive, yet look at what you did instead. And if you're in a serious psychological rut, he says you can just lower the bar for what gets to count as an accomplishment. Nobody ever needed to know that you added brushed teeth or made coffee to your done list. But a done list isn't just a way to feel better about yourself. You need to give up the impossible quest to pay off your productivity debt and instead start thinking about each day as an opportunity to move a small but meaningful set of items over to your done list. And you'll find that you make better choices about what to focus on. And because you'll actually make more progress on them by wasting less time and energy being distracted by the stress about all of the other stuff that you're unavoidably neglecting. So paying off this imaginary productivity debt completely, in other words, working so hard and so efficiently that you no longer feel like you're falling behind, is literally impossible.
Not bad.
It's not just grueling and unpleasant. And in the modern world of work, there is no limit to the number of emails that you might receive and the demands that your boss might make and the ambitions that you might have for your career. So there's no reason to believe that you'll ever get to the end of them. Meanwhile, modern...
So one thing I want to say with that, and I think that's very, very interesting, all the points that he made were very, very relatable within what I'm pursuing within my own life. And I had this saying that I always say, the only thing you can truly be satisfied with is your day's work. Yeah, the first guy that he was mentioning, how he's like, you can only have 30 minutes before bed, and you better hope that you got everything done. If not, you probably should feel guilty for not accomplishing as much as you possibly could accomplish in that day. I'd say it's relatively the same for me. It is something that is an internal sense of guilt. It's always being super self-aware and self-critical. Being your biggest critic for sure is something that I've definitely dealt with, especially with having a podcast. And the work is technically never done. When you're building a personal brand, there's always something that can be done. It's never like, oh yeah, well I did everything I could do for the day. Almost like if you were to go to work or something like that, you can accomplish the task that needs to be done within the day, and that is a good day, right? It's slightly similar because it's like I could either not do any at all, or I could do so much. I could be working on my personal brand 24 hours a day, realistically speaking, right? And never be done with it. That's what it is really. So like there's only so much you could do in a job technically, right? Like you might be able to finish your week's worth in one day, right? I can't there is no week's worth of work. It is just as much as I can do within a day, and that's gonna be what it is at the end of the day for sure. But it's definitely an interesting concept for sure. It's definitely something that is almost unrealistic standard for anybody to live up to. But at the end of the day, excellence is what we're all chasing.
Media, especially social media, is a giant machine for exposing you to a bottomless news feed of far more suffering than St. Francis of Assisi himself was ever asked to care about. So whenever Oliver manages to remember that this is just the way things are, that the cosmic debt that he seems to imagine that he has to pay off is in fact inherently impossible to pay off, he finds that he is far better able to relax in the midst of having too much to do, as opposed to making relaxation dependent on first getting on top of it all, which he never will. And crucially, he thinks he's better placed to actually do things, the productive and good citizen things that were the focus of all of this angst in the first place. Look, there they are on the done list. Not many of them, perhaps, at least by comparison to the immeasurable galaxy of things that need doing. Still, there are generally quite a few more than 0 items there by the time that 6 p.m. rolls around. And then I think he said at 6 p.m. he usually mixes a gin and tonic, but that tends to not get added to the list. Generally, this idea of productivity debt, I think, puts a name on a sensation that lots of us feel. This odd
100%.
requirement to sort of whip ourselves into submission, this odd sense that we are falling behind. He has this great term. What is it he says earlier on? He talks about this vague sense that you are falling behind. And it's just this sort of ambient thing. He needs to justify his existence by staying on top of things. This vague sense he's falling behind and need to claw my way back up to some minimum standard of output. And you know, this is kind of, I guess, the dark side of being interested in productivity and efficiency, that you set yourself this unbelievable bar and you're probably excited by lots of different things. You're probably good at lots of different things. So the options that you have in front of you are high, and you hold yourself to high standards, and you want to make an impact on the world, and you want to maximize your brief sliver of time whilst you're existing in this the 2 eternities of darkness. Here you are. This is your time. I'm going to get the most out of it. And what that ends up doing is this sort of permanent imbalance between the things you want to do and the things that you end up doing, which actually means that even the things you do have this odd sort of tarnished sense to them. I certainly know this like unbelievably well myself. You know, doing a live show, and it's the 3rd show that I've ever done, and it's London, and it's sold out on a Saturday night at Leicester Square Theatre or wherever we were last year, and everything goes well, and it's, you know, it is still early on in my career, and yet when I finish up, I'll look back and focus on those 2 little sections that I didn't quite get right, and forget the 1 hour and 58 minutes of pretty much perfect, exactly what I wanted and expected and would hope to get out of it. But I'll just focus on those other 2 things. And
So one thing I want to say with this as well is this is the curse of being super self-critical and just analyzing all your problems and then analyzing all you can do. You fully don't give yourself the actual praise you probably deserve at the end of the day. And it is in itself a problem, right? This is something that I've encountered with just being super self-critical. of my own self and my own progression and my own achievements that I have achieved, it becomes something that's very, very. It's an interesting relationship to have with your creative endeavor. I'll say that because it's you should be it might even be the wrong focus at the end of the day, right? You do want to get better, and you do know that if in order to get better you're going to need to optimize for a few things and get better at a few things and always improve and make sure you're on your best, because if you're not your best then you're going to feel that regret of not being your best. But at the end of the day, it is a problem, but at the end of the day, what other problems would you rather have? There's a lot more worse problems to have than to have the problem of just being super self-critical. At least you're doing something, because a lot of people aren't doing shit at the end of the day. And that is what it comes down to. That is a perspective that I have and try to remind myself with. And of course, it is kind of odd to compare myself to people who I don't think it really isn't even a worthy comparison. And not to gas myself up, at the end of the day, there's really not that many people who are taking on a big creative goal as I am, right? And with that being said, I think it is something that people need to keep into mind, especially anybody who is a creative and who's constantly trying to build something, even a personal brand, is at the end of the day, most people aren't doing shit and you're making progress and you're trying to make your little dent in the world. And that's all that really matters. You can control what you can control. Obviously, try to release tension in the situations in which you cannot control. But at the end of the day, you're trying something. You're trying to make an impact. You're trying to help people out, hopefully.
Sort of negativity bias that we have, plus this.
By the way, shout out to Heem, shout out to Anthony. Appreciate for tapping in, man. If there's a specific video or a creator that I'm going to go ahead and react to, let me know for sure.
Sense that we should always be doing more, always be working harder. You know, if you've ever gone through a period of really intense work and all that you think about is, God, I just wish I could have, one weekend at home. I just don't want to be traveling again, or I don't want to be working again, or, I don't want to have to get up on time. I just wish I could have one lie-in. And then after 2 lie-ins, you now think, I really need to get back on that grind.
Slacking.
I'm feeling a little bit lazy.
Slacking,
like,
dog.
You just said only 48 hours ago that you couldn't wait to get a little bit of a break. Yeah, for the
Trying to log back
sort
in.
of type A go-getter people, I think this is just an ambient demon that sits on everybody's shoulder. And Matthew's idea of this internal tyrant that's constantly whipping him, I think, is pretty illuminating. So yeah, that's one of my favorites. Productivity debt is just so fundamental to how lots of people see the world. All right, next one. The curse of competence. This is something I've been thinking about for
here
a
we
little
go.
while.
Fuck.
You probably are pretty competent if you're listening to this podcast. You can do things and you're prepared to try new stuff. And when you try new stuff, you don't suck that much and you seem to probably make progress more quickly than most people. And this is the curse of competence, because your options for life direction are less constrained by your abilities and more constrained by your choices. And this sounds like a blessing. And indeed, it probably is better than the alternative, but it's
Exactly.
a unique category of problem which occurs while people tell you how fortunate you are to deal with it. So Barry Schwartz in The Paradox of Choice talks about the process of buying jeans 60 years ago, and you go to the jeans store and there is one type, one color, one cut. You find your waist size, you pay, and you walk out. Now, you may have wanted a slightly different style of jeans or length or color or whatever, but you had no choice other than what was given to you. So your total utility from the jeans may not be maximized, but your satisfaction with the decision is pretty high, knowing that you got the best that you could given the circumstances. And if you compare that to today, and you go to the jeans store and look around, do you want skinny or boot cut? Straight leg, cropped? Do you want ripped, blue, grey, acid wash, with contrast stitching or without? The options are endless, and hooray, this means that you can finally select the exact pair of jeans that you were looking for.
But
it also means that any suboptimal decision is entirely your fault. If you were unhappy with your jeans in 1960, it's the fault of the crappy jeans store. If you're unhappy with your jeans in 2024, it's the fault of your research. Previously, your experience was largely out of your hands and limited by the world. Today, it's only limited by your choices. And this is how a constraint of options makes the decision-making process easier. And the curse of competence plays into this as well. So if you're only good at one category of things, you sure might be unhappy that you can't do something else, and that indeed is a rubbish situation. But the constraint helps to narrow your choices down. On the other
True.
hand, if you're good at lots of things, there are many paths open to you, which is liberating, but can also cause you to be scared and confused and frozen in place. And
This is one concept that I came up with. It doesn't exactly, the context in which I created it or had thought about it isn't exactly what applies, but it can apply. It is called option indecision. It's basically this concept that I had thought about, where if you have so much options, like a lot of people do within a lot of different things, right? Instead of thinking, oh, well, I can select whatever option I would like and I could probably be satisfied with that option, right? Sacrificing or choosing one is sacrificing another, right? That is what you have to give up. That is what you have to, like, essentially, yeah, that's what you have to sacrifice, right? So people are not necessarily as satisfied as they possibly can be with the decision that they do end up making, even if it at the time was the best decision. They think to themselves, oh, well, I could have chosen something else and that would give a different result. And it's just that option indecision, or to the point where maybe they're either indecisive or they're in a position where they don't know what to choose, so they maybe not choose, they won't choose anything at all, and then live with the indecision that is trying to decide what you're trying to pick, right? So I think that's just an interesting concept. The way he's talking about it is definitely interesting for sure.
we call this a titanic problem, which is an issue everyone says you're in such a privileged position to deal with. Adam Mastriani says this is an extra special type of tragedy, a tragedy that unfolds while everyone cheers, like being on the Titanic after the iceberg hits, water up to your chin, with everybody telling you that you're so lucky to be on the greatest steamship of all time. And the Titanic is indeed so huge and wonderful that you can't help but agree, but you're also feeling a bit cold and wet at the moment, and you're not sure why. Having lots of competencies that you could follow in your life is exciting, but it's also terrifying and paralyzing too. Plus, you have the added challenge of feeling guilty for your seeming ungratefulness, even though the world is at your feet. So it's this very odd sort of concatenation of paralysis of analysis, lots of life choices, lots of different
Option
directions
decision.
that you could go in with things. This sort of shame and guilt around who am I to complain when there's ostensibly nothing wrong. I have all of these different options. Should I not feel grateful for this? And yet I can't help but feel like, I don't know, the decision making, having to choose what it is that I'm going to do just feels exhausting to me and tiring. And I think that this is a challenge that people who are competent face. And it's, with the Titanic problem thing, it is exactly the sort of problem no one is ever going to give you sympathy for. Oh, poor, talented person. Look at how many different directions you could go in life. You could go into sales, or you could go into marketing, or you could go into the family business, or you could do whatever. Maybe you want to be a mum or a dad. Maybe you want to be a teacher. You'd be great at it. All of these different options in front of you. No one is going to ever give sympathy to the person who has too many choices, and yet the felt experience of that person is always going to be painful a lot of the time. So constraining down your choices, picking the thing that you're going to do, periodizing it is a good solution. Instead of saying, I have all of these roads open in front of me and this one that I choose has to be the right one. If you set yourself a maximizing decision criteria as opposed to a satisfying one, good enough or perfect, if you get to good enough and say, well, I'm going to do this, but it's probably a reversible decision. Maybe I can try X project for 90 days or a year or something like that. And if I don't like it, then I can pivot into something else. And here's the brilliant thing. If you are competent, there are other things that you can pivot out of.
You'll be able to bounce back for damn sure.
Changing from a maximizing lifelong commitment to a satisfying experimental commitment is probably a good reframe. Look, just give it a crack. Give the thing that you're thinking about a try, and if it doesn't work, you can pivot out of it. But yeah, the curse of competence, something pretty important, I think. I learned this word as well, actually. William Costello mentioned it to me when I sent him the Oliver Burkeman episode a couple of weeks ago. And he said how sanguine he found Oliver. And
He
I'd
was like,
seen
what the
this
fuck?
word written down. I can pronounce it, but I had no idea what it meant. So sanguine means optimistic or positive, especially in apparently bad or difficult situations. He is sanguine about prospects for the global economy. The committee takes a more sanguine view. In medieval science and medicine, of or having the constitution associated with the predominance of blood among the bodily humors supposedly marked a ruddy complexion and an optimistic disposition. So like everybody that's florid or ruddy in the UK that gets accused of being gammon is actually just having a optimistic disposition. But yeah, sanguine, I really love that as a word. And what it describes, I think, is Oliver Burkeman and Alain de Botton's approach, this sort of very self-effacing, things are difficult and I am flawed and life is hard and I probably suck quite a lot, but here is a hopeful view of how I can get past it, taking into account all of my flaws, and being sanguine, just that kind of joviality in the face of life's challenges is cool, and I'm finding myself gravitating more toward people who create content like that. I think it really sees the human condition.
I would say that's probably the most optimal way of being for pretty much everybody to an extent, right? It's not necessarily to be naive. That's for damn sure, right? Because you could be naive and jovial, like he described, and have a very, very optimistic view of life. But to be more sanguine, I think it is probably going to look more like understanding the concepts of the world and understanding basically having your shadow integrated, right? Being able to view life knowing that life can be bad, but it doesn't necessarily need to be bad, if that makes any sense. And it can be positive and and you can be optimistic within this. You can dance within the rain, right? And I feel like that is probably the most optimal view that anyone could have of life. Not necessarily to be naive though, like I had mentioned. You got to keep that in mind for damn sure. But yeah, I would say that's pretty much it, right? It's the most optimal way to live. But like I said, don't be naive. Understand the world is very, very brutal, very, very cold. But at the end of the day, it's like shit could always be worse.
An interesting way. So just I don't know, little dictionary moment for you there.
Sanguine.
All right, next one. This is The Power of Low Self-Esteem. In September 1893, Churchill was admitted on his third attempt to the Sandhurst Military College. He wrote to his father, "I was so glad to be able to send you the good news on Thursday." His father, a former Chancellor of the Exchequer and leader of the House of Commons, wrote back a week later, "You should be ashamed of your slovenly, happy-go-lucky, harum-scarum style of work. Never have I received really any good report from your conduct from any headmaster or tutor. Always behind, incessant complaints, and a total want of application to your work. You have failed to get into the 60th Rifles, the finest regiment in the army. You have imposed on me some extra charge of £200 a year. Do not think that I'm going to take the trouble of writing you long letters after every failure you commit and undergo. I no longer attach the slightest weight to anything you may say. If you cannot prevent yourself from leading the idle, useless, unprofitable life you have had during your school days, you will become a mere social wastrel, one of the hundreds of public school failures. You will
Motherfucker's on his
degenerate
dome
into
piece.
a shabby,
God
unhappy,
damn.
futile existence.
Hop
You will
off.
have to bear all the blame for such misfortunes. Your mother sends her love." Churchill was 19.
God damn.
And that story hurts me to read, because I don't know the inner texture of Churchill's mind, but I would bet that even after defeating Nazi Germany and winning World War II, he probably still didn't feel good enough. You know, V-Day, whenever it was, June 30th, 1945 or something. How long did that sense of validation and enoughness linger with Churchill, having the greatest threat that had been faced for a very long time was just defeated? 2 days? Less than a day, maybe? Like, how quickly did his mind get back to castigating himself with that voice, that internal tyrant that was his father? And, you know, it sort of begs the question, what is the point of success if there is no satisfaction in the succeeding? Which is why you should be very aware of envying successful humans, because the price that you would need to pay to be the people that you admire is often one that you wouldn't foot the bill for. And I spoke about this idea to Neil Strauss, the guy that wrote The Game, and he wrote Rick Rubin's book, and then he wrote The Truth. He's getting like 7 New York Times bestsellers, I think, and he's writing a new book. And he told me the title of this new book, and I came up with a rule off the back of his title, which is, you can tell how good an idea is by how envious you are of not coming up with it yourself when you hear about it. And he told me the title of this book, and I was like, fuck, that's so good. Why didn't I think of that? And the title of his new book is The Power of Low Self-Esteem. And it's this same idea that I've been obsessed with for a long time, which is, look at the very successful, very impressive people that you admire, that lots of people look up to, that we all hold in high esteem, and look at what the internal texture of their mind's like. Look at what the day-to-day existence for them feels like. And
is it worth
what
it?
does it mean? How driven to do amazing, great, fantastical things are they? And yet,
What's the drawback?
in reality, do you want to be that person? Like, do you want to pay the price that you need to be the people that you admire? And The Power of Low Self-Esteem, just what an awesome title. And you can tell how good an idea is by how envious you are of not having come up with it yourself. So yeah, next one. This is kind of cool.
One thing I want to say with that as well, I think it's very, very interesting. Because it's kind of like this, right? So yes, he is right to an extent. It'd be wonderful to come up with great ideas, of course, and hopefully. Here's the thing. My thing is, I never feel that way particularly because I can come up with my own good ideas. But I think it's even more interesting and more. It needs to be said. This needs to be said, right? I feel like people don't necessarily care who said it first. They care about who they hear it from. So there's something that I could take from watching Chris Williamson for a while, right? And then I could say that on a later date, and people will still, let's just say that video goes viral, right? But they didn't hear it from Chris Williamson. They heard it from me, right? People only really would give a shit is when they hear it, who they hear it from, and when did they hear it, right? That's all. That's pretty much all they're really gonna give a shit about, especially within today's society. I would say the value of a quote means probably less than it ever has, right? Because information is just so vast. There's too much of an abundance of information that, like I said, people don't necessarily really care to hear where the origin of that sentence or of that phrase comes from. They just simply care if they heard it or if they didn't hear it and who they heard it from. That's pretty much it. Let me know what you think about that in the comments.
Fine, but also kind of cool. Obesity is now a greater threat to global health than hunger. A new Lancet study has found that more than 1 in 8 people in the world are clinically obese. The number passed 1 billion for the first time, and it is now the leading form of malnutrition, with the number of people considered underweight falling below 550 million. Being obese or underweight are both forms of malnutrition, because in both cases people are not getting the right nutrients and vitamins and the types of calories that they need in order to be healthy. And
rule number 1 of life: don't be overweight. You know, it sounds like, oh my God, champ, you're so insensitive. How could you be so insensitive to overweight people, right? They're insensitive to themselves. They're insensitive to the people around them, to their future self that's going to hate them for being in the position. In future, you know, they're going to be compromised within their health, right? You're being insensitive to yourself, right? I criticize bad behavior on here, and here's the thing: nobody's unexcused from criticism. And here's the thing: and not even me, not even how much I've done, not even how much anybody who's great at something has ever done themselves, right? No one can be unexcused from bad behavior, and I don't think anybody should. Everybody needs to be held accountable to an extent. And obesity being a bigger threat to the world than hunger is ridiculous. It just goes to show how stupid people are. I'm sorry, that's just what it is. People are fucking idiots, right? There's one thing, of course it would have to be our fucking country that leads this shit too. That's the fucking crazy part. It's like, isn't that tragic, right? 100 years ago, we might have been struggling a lot more. 1,000 years ago, we were definitely struggling. Now we're just fucking fat, dude. Are you fucking serious? So stupid. Get into the gym, start eating healthy. Stop eating bullshit. Stop eating for convenience, and then you'll be okay. It's start fasting. There's many different things that people can do. It's just here's the thing. It's not even the problem isn't necessarily that they're obese or that the problem isn't just that they're obese, is that they're fucking lazy too. If you're lazy and obese, you're gonna stay obese. You're gonna get even worse than obese because not only are you already at a disadvantage, but you're also not you're too lazy to seek out the solution to your problem. It's just overall fucked. It's overall fucked. But rule number one of life: don't be fat.
Basically warned that children were paying the price for inaction on obesity by global leaders, with under 18s accounting for 159 million of those who are obese. So nearly twice as many people who are obese than are underweight, and it is the leading form of malnutrition in the world. And then I saw a study that showed people spend 8 hours a day on screens on average and 6.5 hours a day asleep on average.
That shit's crazy, dude.
More people are dealing with malnutrition due to obesity than due to being underweight, and people spend more time per day on their screens than they do asleep. And that is a terrifying insight about the state of modern health.
And with that being said, right, that is a lot of the problems that do exist right now within society. That is a lot of problems that a lot of people have right now within society. They're unhealthy, and they might be unhealthy. One reason might be because they lack sleep, and they lack sleep because they're on their phone. Therefore, their attention span's trash, their self-discipline's trash. You see what I'm saying? It just trickles out into like a lot of different aspects of life. Or so let's just say they're not as productive, so they need to eat for convenience because they want more time back. And then you see what I'm saying? It's like it's just a whole fuck thing, right? You eat for convenience, okay? Well, you know what's convenient? Fast food. So you go for fast food. Now your health is compromised. But here's the thing: you can at least distract yourself with your phone, and now you distract yourself with your phone, you're getting less sleep, and you get less sleep, your health declines, and when your health declines, it's a whole shit show of it's a whole shit show in this fucking world right now. God damn it! Don't be a part of the problem. Be part of the solution. That's what I preach on this podcast, man. Saw an Instagram post that said you're fat phobic for doing things to become healthier and to lose weight. People are fucking idiots.
Next one. This is cool. I like this one. So, stop trading things that matter for ones that don't. This is from James Clear.
Easy.
If you already live a comfortable life, then choosing to make more money but live a worse daily life is a bad trade.
Facts.
And yet we talk ourselves into it all the time. We take promotions that pay more but swallow our free time. We already have a successful business but break ourselves trying to make it even more successful. Too much focus on wealth, not enough focus on lifestyle. And this is kind of goes back to the hidden and observable metrics thing that me and George Mack talk about, whereby the more observable and quantifiable and socially rewarded a particular metric is, the more acclaim that it gives you, the more status that it affords, the more that you're going to lean into that. And, quality of lifestyle, like real, what is the day-to-day existence of you like? How happy are you? How much spare time do you have to do the things that you care about? That is very hard to flex, and it's very hard to measure as well. But your bank account, it's pretty easy to measure, or the value of your house, or the number of bedrooms that it's got, or the growth of your company, or your job title. All of these things, super easy games, and too much focus on wealth, not enough focus on lifestyle is just a nice reframe. It reminds us, what are you trying to accumulate this wealth for? Presumably to afford yourself the kind of lifestyle that you enjoy. If you've already achieved a kind of lifestyle where you are happy and you then worsen that in an attempt to make more money, the bar stool is upside down. You're sacrificing the thing you want for the thing that's supposed to get it.
One thing I want to mention with this, and I think this is very, very important. One of the most important questions that I was ever asked is, what lifestyle do you want to live? Not what job do you want to go ahead and have, but what lifestyle that you want, right? what lifestyle do you want to live, and then you can figure out everything else with that, right? The type of partner that you want, the type of job that's going to allow you to live that type of lifestyle, right? There's many different things that need to be answered. But if you're able to clarify what lifestyle that you want to live for yourself and for your future self, that should set the foundation for the decisions that you make that are going to be very, very big life decisions, right? And I feel like a lot of people, they want a certain lifestyle, but they have not chosen the right career path that's going to lead them to that lifestyle. So therefore, they're going to be missing out on the fulfillment that life is going to bring. Or maybe they choose a job that's going to give them the money to be able to live a type of lifestyle, but it's going to require more of their time. So therefore, they're not going to be able to live that lifestyle that they had set out for, because now their time is being compromised. They're trading their time for money instead of figuring out a way to live the lifestyle that they want and have the time to go ahead and do it, right? So answer that question is one of the most important questions that I've ever asked myself. And it is the reason why I have constructed my life to make the decisions that are going to lead me to ultimately the end game, which is the lifestyle that I want to live. As it is one of the most important things to everyone pretty much.
And then Oliver Berkman again says, just because you're at the top does not mean that you're enjoying life. The upper ranks of corporate life are dominated by insecure overachievers, people who are driven by a deep sense of inadequacy and are not having any fun, even though they've supposedly won this very competitive race. So again, the people that you admire, the people at the top of the totem pole, do you really want that life? Are they having fun, or are they dominated by insecure overachievers? These inadequate, the productivity debt riddled people. Is that really who you want? And then I kind of tied this to, I molested a quote from Nassim Taleb, where he says there's two types of people in the world: those who don't know how to make money and those who don't know when to stop. And I changed this to the Matthew principle of self-improvement, which is there are two types of people in the world: those who don't know how to improve their lives and those who don't know when to stop. And people who can improve their lives will always struggle to be around people who can't.
Big facts.
Personal growth and self-improvement is liberating, and it's fulfilling, and it's exciting. But it is also a trap, I think, that convinces you that you're an unfinished article who doesn't need to start enjoying life yet. And you can defer happiness until you've reached a certain level of development. You say to yourself, I'll really start living when I finally mastered this new meditation technique, or got to single digit body fat, or hit 6 figures a year income, or bought that new house, or read 100 books, or grown my channel to 1 million subscribers, or whatever. And personal growthers like you have probably learned that a sacrifice reward dynamic is useful. And it is useful in the micro, but it's malignant in the macro. We teach ourselves that we need to do the tough things first so that we can enjoy the fun things later. And if that's go to the gym before watch some YouTube, I think that's fine. But if it's complete an arbitrary amount of life improving before actually feel like we can let ourselves enjoy life, it's not fine. And the perennially difficult balance of the personal growther is between being and becoming. It's between feeling enough and wanting to be better, between a desire for more and a satisfaction for what you already have. You want to leave it all out on the field of play, but you realize that if you're constantly driven by desiring more, it's difficult to take time to enjoy the process of playing the game. And it's tough. I think, to be honest, this is the personal growth problem. It's the most common question that was asked at the live shows that I did last year and the Q&As. How do I know if I'm working hard enough? I feel like I'm sacrificing the thing I want, which is happiness, for the thing which is supposed to get it, which is success. I'm in this sort of lonely chapter thing, and I'm grinding away, and I have faith that this is going to be good for me in the long term, but I also don't want to look back in 20 years and realize that I basically just sacrificed my youth and my virility and all of the time that I had. And it's anxiety inducing. People don't like it. And it's tough. It is very, very tough to basically let go of that desire for more, for maximizing. But one solution that I quite like, that I got from Sam Harris last year, was to basically try and string together some moments of peace and gratitude wherever you can. So just 30 seconds, 5 times a day, really putting your mind where your feet are. So taking a deep breath in and allowing your mind to focus on the peripherals of your vision, and think about something that makes you happy. Think about how the things that you have now are only once things that you dreamed of having. Think about how insane it would be if you, from 5 years ago, could see this newly improved texture of your mind or quality of your life and clarity of your thoughts, and realize that all of the striving and pushing and grinding is indeed satisfying. But if you can't have fun now, you're never going to have fun.
One thing I want to mention with that, I think this is very, very important as well. This is something that I have really focused in on today, particularly, right? This is something that I think I have struggled in the past with being able to enjoy the fruits of my labor, right? Take the time to appreciate the self-development that I have done for myself, the sacrifices that I have made, adopting more responsibility, right? And enjoying the fruits of that labor, because there are fruits of that labor for damn sure, right? And I did this when I was on my walk today, right? This is a habit that I've only done a few times, but every single time I've done it, like Chris Williamson had mentioned, it allows me to put my feet on the ground and allow me to observe my environment and to be in a state of in a state of gratitude, to be able to enjoy the texture of my mind that he had mentioned. I think that's very, very interesting. But I had thought about it. I came to this conclusion that the greatest value that something can provide you is going to be character development. And if you're not taking enough time to truly give yourself if you're not taking the time to truly be grateful for the character development that has been, that, like he had mentioned, that you once wanted, and who you once wanted to be, more importantly, then what is it all for at the end of the day? You can't just be chasing this. You can't just be perpetually just chasing this version of yourself. You need to be grateful for who you are. You need to be grateful for the things that you have. You need to be grateful for the responsibilities that you've adopted, the sacrifices that you have made, and enjoy it. Enjoy it for a few minutes. I'm not saying you should sulk in it. I'm not saying you should take 5 days off and then just. That's not what I'm saying. But you need to find moments within your day where it's okay to just say, or maybe a moment or two within your week, and just sit down with yourself and say, "Wow, I have made progress. I am proud of myself. I am doing the right thing. I am making the right moves." And hopefully you are. And if you're not, then you need to go ahead and do that. And then you will truly have that good moment of satisfaction that you truly deserve if you've been putting in the work. And if you haven't been putting in the work, well, you got bigger fish to fry at the end of the day, right? But I do believe that if you're able to find time for this could be one of the most rewarding things. And this was one of the most rewarding things of my day today. And one thing that I will try to continue my best to go ahead and take the time to truly enjoy what I built. And more importantly, who I became.
Start having fun now. You must begin enjoying life right now. Because
yes, that is true. You must begin to enjoy life right now, but at the same time, you must understand that there has to be somewhat of a balance, even if it's somewhat imbalanced, right? You need to be able to enjoy life, but make sure that enjoying life isn't compromising what you're trying to build to enjoy life even more in the future. That's for damn sure.
Is only ever going to be right now. You cannot continue to push this thing down the road. And the reason that I like that idea from Sam, I think originally called it a realistic path to enlightenment, which are these moments of peace, like MOPS. And the best way that I found to do that, I'm so bad at this, by the way, which is why is why I think about it a lot. I have Post-it notes around the house. So there's some next to the back door, there's some on the window in front of where my sort of computer sits, and it just asks me little questions like, are you as present as you could be right now? What went well today? And each time that I see one of those Post-it notes, I try to take between sort of 15 and 30 seconds to have, okay, mind is resting where feet are. And what I mean by that is I'm not distracted, I'm not ruminating about yesterday, I'm not thinking about tomorrow, I'm not concerned about what's going to come, I'm not fretting about what's happened. And I just think, okay, like, can I do just 15 seconds or 30 seconds? And when I look back on the day, those moments often appear in the top 5 things that's happened. Like really just taking a moment. So that's weird. That's like gratitude at the end of the day for being grateful during the day, which is very nice because that's a sort of self-reinforcing cycle. The more gratitude you do, the more easy it is to find and the more grateful you are for your gratitude. So yeah, maybe the post-it note, or maybe you want to use reminders on your phone to sort of trigger you every
I feel like that's kind of
few
easy
hours
to
or
get
something
lost
throughout
with
the day,
that.
but
It's easy to ignore that.
that
It's
seems
too easy
work
to
for me.
ignore that for me
And
personally.
this balance. The other thing as well to say is that this is a very hard thing to strike a balance of. So if you are someone that is trying to improve yourself, that has big dreams and big goals and all the rest of it, accepting this is the cost of doing business. This isn't some personal curse that's been bestowed on you that I'm having to suffer with this thing. God, how feeble and malignant and broken am I? How uniquely cursed is my particular setup? No. This is how everybody feels. This is every single person that wants to do a lot, that wants to know that they should enjoy life, but also wants to leave it all out there on the field of play. This is just part of the course. Hopefully that makes it seem a little bit easier to deal with. I'll tell you if I find out a proper
It's
solution.
acceptance. Acceptance. This is the fate.
All right, next one.
This is the life, man.
This is cool, and this one got retweeted by Elon, so it's got his seal of approval, whatever that means.
Elon. Shout out to Elon.
The culture wars shiny object cycle. Number 1, some woke news story hits the press, like cats suffer from racial discrimination, or screwing in light bulbs need to be recognized as a valid sexual kink, or something. Number 2, the right-wing antibody response activates. Look at how insane these people are. Matt Walsh quote tweets the article and calls it obnoxious. This is the problem with our convenient, decadent TikTok society. Number 3, this reaction causes the story to gain infinitely more traction than it ever would have done by signal boosting the original Fringe scenario into a much bigger event. Number 4, the left-wing counter-response activates. Right-wingers lose their mind over one woman with a particularly dark cat. The Daily Wire has a meltdown over an insignificant troll article. In times when the original story is actually less insane, this can include a defense of the original article too. Cats actually can experience trauma. Minimizing this is the real problem. Number 5, the right-wing re-reaction kicks into gear. Apparently, I'm insane for pushing back against cat trauma. See, this is the problem. If we don't stand our ground, these blue-haired idiots will take over the country. Number 6, finally, the touch grass meta-reactionaries steam in. The real issue is people talking about this issue. Look at how silly this whole thing is. It's time to check out of the culture war. We should reconnect with what really matters. You should move on to the ranch next to Ryan Holiday and hammer fence posts into the ground for the rest of time. And this is something I noticed over and over and over again. This culture wars shiny object cycle, this sort of 6-stage process, and it can begin with the left signal boosting something.
It all
from the
ends
right,
with
and then
who
it can
gives a
happen in
fuck and
reverse.
why the fuck do we
But the
care in the
cycle
first
is
place?
banal and it's excruciatingly repetitive. So I wondered why it sustains our attention if basically the discussion follows the same format every single time. And the reason I realized it, my idea is that it's because each story is sprinkled with just enough novelty to give it the illusion that this is a new, different event, which legitimates the pushback. So you see this perfect example with the trans flag. So each year, some new group gets added to the trans flag. And then that, even though it's basically the same, exactly the same culture war shiny
Pride
object
Month's over,
cycle,
fellas?
still go through the same 6 steps.
What do y'all think about
But
that? Pride
people
Month's
will
over,
justify
finally.
criticism of it by saying, see, we haven't seen this trans flag with people who
Oh,
suffer from a
man.
gluten intolerance included in it before, or someone with a club foot, or you know, a person who's afraid of flying. And it's like the 20th season of Lost, when they're back on the island for the 7th time and they need to escape, but this time it's winter. And it just sprinkles sufficient novelty so that people are always, well, you know, this does seem to be legitimate. I haven't quite seen this one before. And the shiny object cycle does my head in. It does my head in largely because I get captured by it. And I see a bank rewriting a classic fairy tale into a boss bitch remake and calling it Fairy Tales, princesses doing it for themselves. And I think, this is fucking dumb. Where's
Facts.
Douglas Murray? I need him to decimate this idea with me. And it's cathartic. It makes you feel good to tear this sort of stupid idea down. Calling out insane insights written by idiots is so
Jaded,
compelling
goddamn
and
it.
fun and easy to do.
Finally is wild. It's not like they stopped existing after. And then Jaden with the rainbows, of course. God damn. So I had made a YouTube short about that the other day. Or it's almost okay, if you go to my YouTube channel and you go to videos, I reacted to Jordan Peterson talking about Pride Month. And that was probably one of the funniest videos that I've ever made. And honestly, I didn't get enough recognition on that video. I might have to repost that shit because that shit was so funny. But yeah, just go ahead and watch that video after this, and maybe you'll find some enjoyment, or maybe it'll give you new insight. It is definitely something worth considering for sure.
It's like being a cocaine
Finally, it's
addict
funny, though. I ain't
with
gonna lie.
Pablo Escobar as a next door neighbor. There is an unlimited supply, and the means of production are just whirring at maximum RPM, and we're all caught in the vortex. And it was Douglas, actually, who reminded me why I'm getting so exasperated with this cycle, because it's a distraction. It's a distraction from our attention being focused on things which are actually meaningful. And not just meaningful in a you will remember this when you're dead way, but in a there's other issues to talk about that are more important way. Like, there's entire American cities with fentanyl epidemics, and 80% of suicides of people aged 18 to 24 are men. Like, I want to hear Jordan Peterson talk about dealing with finding meaning in a world stripped of all of its guardrails. And I want Nassim Taleb to be writing about applying complex maths to simple life problems. Many of the smartest people on the planet have had their attention captured arguing about whether men are men and women are women or not over the last few years, and even more of the less smart ones as well. And all of our minds are held hostage by an endless cycle of shiny objects that aggravates both sides, and it makes them feel righteous for standing their ground. And I think this is a bottomless pit. I don't think that it's going to stop. I will almost certainly bring up stories like this in the future, but I'm really going to try hard to focus more on stuff that matters in 50 years, not just in 50 minutes. And I think probably so should you. It's so funny because in the moment, all that you're doing is tearing down the stupid idea, and it's hilarious and it's worthy of communication and it's easy for people to understand, and it's got hypocrisy and it's got all the rest of it. And yet, when you think about, in retrospect, how does it make you feel? How did talking about this thing and embroiling yourself, getting agitated, even just the mind share, what else could you have been thinking about? And it doesn't need to be stuff that you're going to recall at the end of your life, because the bar is set so low. But I can promise you that the particularly dark cat or the light bulb screwing in sexual kink is not going to appear there, and it's not going to matter either. So it's neither entertaining nor reassuring nor meaningful. It's like none of the things that you should care about. So yeah, that's
I feel like everybody can admit to being victim of this. Of course, I'm victim of this as well. It's just when you see too much idiots online talking about shit that's should be common knowledge, should be common sense. Obviously, common sense isn't that common, but you can't help but to just mention the fact that people are actually idiots. They have not thoroughly thought about shit. They're just speaking on things that they've heard before, instead of taking the time to truly analyze whether this is of actual substance or not, or whether this is actual validity or not. But yeah, that's neither here nor there. Yeah, Jaden mentioned that's pretty good. Yeah, you can go ahead and read that in the comments, fellas. It's pretty good take. It's pretty good take. Shit doesn't matter. At the end of the day, shit doesn't matter. Bigger fish to fry. Better things to be taken on within our identity, and moving on. Let's get it.
Culture Wars shiny object cycle.
Appreciate you for stopping by. If there's a certain video that I'm going to go to react to, or a creator that I'm going to go to react to, let me know for sure. I'm definitely open to taking suggestions. I'm going to keep playing this out. Like I said, if somebody has a suggestion, I'll look into it, and then we will go ahead and go from there. Also, if there's, if you have a question, or you want to know my take on something, feel free to leave it in the comments. Obviously, the comments are live comments for sure. So leave it in the comments, please.
that's kind of, I guess, interesting about it. When you see a format, a structure that things tend to move through, if you can call it out in advance, it makes, whenever it happens again, it makes it seem so much more ridiculous, because as you start to see this thing unfold, you realize, oh, this isn't novel. This is just the same playbook going through again and again. And I quite like, Rob Henderson had something called the Hendersonian news cycle, which every single time the same thing happens. And when you see it, you go, oh, like it's like seeing code instead of seeing matrix. You observe what's going on and it just falls into the existing format. So hopefully I've disabused you of at least some shiny objects. All right, next one. This is from Mark Manson, and it's why he hates being around negative people. Being an asshole is a weak person's idea of strength. Complaining is their connection. Never let yourself be held back by other people's fears. People criticize what they're afraid to do themselves because bold action reminds them of their own inaction. If you're afraid to be criticized, why do you care about the opinions of those who are too timid to do it themselves? If you are the criticizer, does tearing someone who has the courage you lack make you feel better? And I love that. Like, I've been railing against cynicism as hard as I can. One of the reasons that I really enjoy being out here in the US, the enthusiasm and the excitability probably can get tiring to some people, but as of yet, it hasn't got tiring to me. And I just like it. I prefer it to the UK. There was this article George sent me. Who was it by? Not by the founder of Spotify, by the founder of Monzo, the bank. It's like a internet bank thing, but it's huge. It's massive. And the founder basically said that the British culture is antithetical to the American dream. And I think it's so true. I think that it is so cutting and skeptical and unsupportive of big dreams and people doing something different. And it's, this 2,000-year-old, ossified, very hierarchical in terms of social class, like just stagnant culture. And the other side of it is it's the 6th biggest economy in the world. The UK is the 6th biggest economy in the world, but it's not the UK.
It's London.
It's London.
I've heard him talk about this shit before.
It's the 6th biggest economy in the world. And what we have in the UK is a very poor country.
He talked about it in the previous
to a
podcast
very
before.
rich city. And yeah, if you're in City of London or the right boroughs of London, maybe the quality of life and everything is great.
But
as soon as you get outside of that, there's this YouTube channel called Bald and Bankrupt that George sent, and it's so good. This dude has done everything. British guy. He's been smuggled across the border from Mexico into the US. He's paid what are they called, jackals or something, coyotes, the smugglers. He's paid them. He's been in war zones. He's been in Russia. He got taken into jail. And now his final boss of the scariest place in the world is to go and visit random northern British seaside towns. And it's just so sad. You see these high streets that are full of boarded up windows and they're in disrepair, and fucking everything is a Claire's Accessories. Everything. Every store's been turned into a Claire's Accessories or a Subway or a Taco Bell or something. And that's if it's not burned down or boarded up. And it just shows. It really does show that you have rich city with a poor country attached to it. The wealth really of the UK is not distributed evenly. And I think that is reflected and contributes to the way that people see the country. So anyway, enough sort of UK bashing. Not that it is. Like I would love for the UK to improve, but I tried to mine my way out from the inside and make changes, and that was a failure. Anyway, next one. Don't wait. Life is happening right now. And I've become pretty obsessed with the belief that life's duties will one day be out of the way, that you can then finally start doing the thing that you want and live your life fully. It's similar to that idea that when you've reached a particular level of personal development, you'll be able to. But this is even more ground floor than that. This is more applicable to more people, because even if you're not doing personal growth, there is this sense that you're just going to delay gratification. And I think that the idea that one day life's duties will be out of the way and that you can finally start doing the thing you want and living your life fully is a myth. I think it's a
I
lie.
agree.
And Marie-Louise von Franz talks about the provisional life. He says, there is a strange feeling that one is not yet in real life. For the time being, one is doing this or that, but there is always the fantasy that sometime in future, the real thing will come about. And it's similar to another idea from Gwynder Bogle called deferred happiness syndrome. The common feeling that your life has not begun, that your present reality is a mere prelude to some idyllic future. This idyll is a mirage that will fade as you approach, revealing that the prelude you rushed through was in fact the one to your death. And it's strange because I regularly have this sort of
Also, you got to know where the fuck you are in the game, brother. You got to know what level you're on. That's for damn sure, right? There's motherfuckers who 40 years old thinking they're still on level 1, level 2, and you're not, right? You got to be very aware of this as well. So it's like you shouldn't always feel like, here's the thing. If you actually have potential, if you're young, you actually have time and you're pursuing what you need to pursue, that's one thing, right? If you're fucking deep into the game, I'm not trying to discourage anybody, but if you're deeper into the game, you know you have less time, and if you know you have less time, there needs to be more urgency, right? And you shouldn't be living in this. It's like okay, it's like if you're young and you have a vision for the future, you're living in delusion, right? Because the future has not yet manifested itself, but at least there's a potential for it to happen, right? If you're 40 years old and still living in that same delusion, you're fucking crazy. You see what I'm saying? It's like it's a little different. You got to know what level you're on. That's for damn sure.
sense of foreboding, kind of, and guilt about time slipping away, that I'm not making enough of my days, and especially when I look back on a week and I know I've done things and dedicated myself to pursuits and working hard, but I can't really fully recall how I actually spent my time. So I worry that this is just a 1 week microcosm of how I look back on my entire life. And as time having passed, but me not really noticing it, of existence occurring, but living not actually having got going. And then I think,
What?
what's the answer? Like, just go full hedonic Dan Bilzerian hyper playboy mode?
Can't do it.
Or cast off all worldly obligations and become a nomad traveling the world, or commit fully to the hardest, most worthwhile pursuits that I can. And I don't know, frankly, but
Mix of all.
I'm
Fuck
pretty
it.
sure that these right now are the golden years. I think that it's quite likely, when you look back, that these times right now will be the ones that you cherish. So you should approach them with joy and care and presence, the requisite joy and care and presence. And
I'd
I
agree.
think, most importantly, ignoring the cynics and the buzzkills. There's this idea from Packy McCormick, and he says, the greatest trick the devil ever played was making you believe that the pessimists are the good guys. Basically, just don't wait. Like, life is happening right now. It is there for you to enjoy. It is there for you to take. Delayed gratification in the extreme just results in no gratification. The sacrifice reward dynamic that you are used to is great in the micro and awful in the macro. It's not about waiting for personal growth to be over. It's not about waiting for something. Life is not happening in future. It is happening right now. And this is something that I need to permanently remind myself of on a minute by minute basis.
Yeah, so you must be present, obviously, like he had mentioned, right? Understand that you potentially are living within the golden years if you are truly making the most of it, right? There's going to be something in the end if you work hard enough for it. But at the same time, like he had mentioned, right, you need to find a balance where, you shouldn't be just cashing out right now. You shouldn't just be indulging within all your pleasures, becoming a hedonist, right? You shouldn't just be, just going all out, right, and not enjoying life as much as you possibly can. And this was a concept that I had came up with, right? How can you maximize the amount of result that you need to go ahead and maximize while also getting the most enjoyment out of it without feeling like you're wasting your time, right? So let's just say, for example, right, if you want to indulge within hedonism to an extent, right? What is the what is the minimum amount that you can do in order to get the maximum amount of result of getting the full squeeze out of the enjoyment of life, right? If you're able to find that balance for yourself, and maybe it's dedicating 90% of your time to being fully locked in and pursuing a hard pursuit, right? A difficult pursuit, and then that in that 10% you get to enjoy it with the people who make it all, who make the struggle worth it, right? That's what I would seem to be a reasonable balance for me, at least in this current period of life. Maybe like 90, 85 to 90% of my time dedicated to pursuing something that is worth meaning, that is a difficult task that not many people have done, which is building a personal brand. And then the rest of that is, like I said, spent enjoying however I kind of would like, but also understanding that there is a limit, and if I overdo it, then I'm gonna feel guilty, and if I feel guilty, then then I'm not doing enough, and if I'm not doing enough, then I need to do more, and if I need to do more, you see what I'm saying? So yeah, you gotta understand yourself. You gotta be self-aware, right? Find the balance within yourself, and like he mentioned, right? Don't wait for life to happen. Go out and get that. Go out and get it, man.
Next one, shadow sentences. So imagine that you've been dating someone and they haven't seen you for a week, and you ask what they're doing tonight, and they tell you that they're hanging out with some of their friends. What you want to say is, I really would like to see you soon, and it makes me worried when you spend time with your friends but not with me, and that it's because you don't actually want to be with me. But what you say instead is, oh, must be a very important night to see your friends again this week, is it? Glad that you've got so much spare time to catch up with them. Or you're out for dinner and your partner is on their phone a lot, and what you want to say is, hey, I'd love to speak, and I know that you're busy, but it makes me feel really good when you focus on me during dinner. Can your phone stuff wait until later? But what you actually say is, that's a very important message to be taking at this time. It's got to be really urgent for you to be answering it over dinner. Or another way to think about this is in terms of literal language or implied language. So people speaking directly are literal speakers. People using shadow sentences are implied speakers. So let's say that a friend comes around to your house to catch up. They would like something to eat. An implied speaker using shadow sentences would say, man, I should have eaten more today, hoping that you pick up on the cue and offer food. A literal speaker would say, hey man, sorry to ask, but I didn't have time to eat before I arrived. Have you got something that I can snack on, and I'll get you next time? So shadow sentences are not stating what you want or need, but instead saying a thing that you hope will cause the other person to realize what you want or need, and then getting upset if they don't. So you kind of
set yourself
in the direct.
You kind of setting yourself up for failure to an extent, right? You're kind of just like hoping that person understands you, but at the same time, it's like, why not be fully fucking upfront at the end of the day, right? And then instead of just trying to hopefully get your fucking heart broken over something that realistically at the end of the day doesn't even matter that much at all, right? It's much better to go ahead and preserve the situation for what it is than to be wishing it went a certain way and it doesn't exactly go that way, and then you have to deal with the consequences of it not going that way, when in reality you could have just fucking had your cake and eat it too by the time, but by just saying what the fuck you actually meant, right? So it's like, come on now
of the thing that you want without asking for it directly. And I think it prevents you from having to be open and vulnerable when it feels like someone else has done something slightly wrong. It protects you from rejection by not actually asking for anything. It's the ultimate expression of, if you love me, you know what was wrong.
Come on, stop fucking around.
Shadow sentences are essentially speaking in code, hoping to be understood, and they cause unvocalized, unmet expectations, which drive unnecessary tension and resentment in relationships. And there's that Neil Strauss quote of, unspoken expectations are premeditated resentments. And the reason that
if you find yourself having this inclination where you're not exactly vocalizing what you're trying to say, but you kind of, like I said, you kind of are trying to leave it up to assumption, that is the perfect moment to go ahead and be by yourself for a little bit, figure it out what that you want to say, figure out what you feel, and then speak on it, right? You need to take a moment for yourself instead of just fucking letting some type of way come out because you're not exactly in the right emotional space to go ahead and express yourself properly, right? Obviously, it takes a lot of fucking character development, and obviously, it's obviously situational, right? But in that particular situation, you need to, and of course, everybody's a victim of this. I'm a victim of this as well, where I kind of want a certain thing to go a certain way, but I don't necessarily say anything. And then if it doesn't go the way that I intended it or wanted it to go, then I feel some type of way about it, right? But the only way you can truly solve that is to be present in the moment, saying, "Holy shit, it's one of these moments again. How can I properly be a person of character and say the thing that I want to go ahead and say it in a way that's not going to piss somebody off or give them the wrong impression of what I actually mean." That's for damn sure. Obviously, it's situational. You got to be self-aware for damn sure.
Shadow sentences are so toxic are because they reduce both parties' desire to communicate openly and honestly with vulnerability and feedback, which becomes a vicious cycle. Because if one person says something passive aggressive, it's so hard to be the person on the other side that decides to be vulnerable and open. It's why, like, I actually think the number one turnoff that anybody can do is being patronizing. Like, if you're being patronizing, that is the biggest erection killer in history. It's just so, it hits, this may just be me, but it hits on all of the different, like, negative, snide, indirect, exclusionary associations that nobody wants to be a part of. So, yeah, I think that thankfully this sort of shadow sentence dynamic is actually quite easy to break by one person just starting to speak openly and carefully, because when that person does it, it gives the other person license to do the same thing. But the reverse is true too. If one person is speaking indirectly, passive aggressively, that creates a dynamic where the other person starts to mirror the way that they behave. So if you're in a relationship that has a lot of shadow sentences in it, or it has a lot of indirect communication, you need to take it upon yourself to break that cycle. It's like a generational trauma being passed down, but it's not. It's just sort of a durational trauma, temporal trauma that's being passed along historically from the back end of your relationship. But it is quite easy to change. And maybe you can even call it out. You could say, look, I've noticed that we're not really speaking that directly anymore. And sometimes I feel really bad because I say things passive aggressively, and I hate when I'm like that. And I'm sure that, it's not the best version of me, and I want to be that person for you. And this can be a friend or a partner or a parent or fucking whoever. I really want to be more direct. And I think that if we both do that with care and attention, we need to be gentle, and it's going to be tough. But if we did that, maybe our communication would be better, and maybe things would seem easier. And the goal really should just be to come out of the shadows. Say what you mean what you say.
Come out of your shadows, not the shadows. Your
I
shadow.
think that would improve an awful lot of communication. This is basically every relationship I had, every couple relationship that I was in from like 18 until 30. It was this. It was just shadow sentences. It was indirect communication. It was a fear of being open and honest in case I was rejected, or they did exactly the same thing. It was this.
Hold up. Let me see this. Hold up. This shit's tweaking out, so give me a second. Finding friends, find the others. Most important lessons about stress. And I'm just going to end it off, fellas. Appreciate everyone for stopping by. Yeah, if there's a specific podcast that I'm going to go ahead and... yeah, if there's a specific podcast or video that I'm going to go ahead and react to it at a future date, let me know for sure. Shit's starting to tweak, man, and can't have that happen, man. But I definitely enjoyed it today. There's a lot of game. There's a lot of game within these podcasts, man. So that is definitely a podcast that I recommend, right? The Modern Wisdom podcast, Chris Williamson's podcast. Fantastic, for sure. It's almost as good as mine. I'm just playing. But yeah, definitely recommend his podcast. His content is very, very good. Something that I watch within my own free time, because it is what I believe to be probably the most beneficial podcast that I've ever watched, besides mine, of course. But yeah, I always wanted to give you guys an insight, a little bit of what things that I truly want to watch, and of course, it's kind of hard to just not watch them on my own free time. I kind of want to make some. I want to make this to be like the most genuine reaction that I can give because it's more entertaining that way, right? For sure. So it's like, yeah, I would say it's just more entertaining that way. If I'm able to give you my first insight to what I am consuming when I'm consuming, as opposed to just me watching it and then saying, oh yeah, this would be a good one to rewatch, right? I think it's more genuine if I just watch it for the first time with you guys. So, like I said, if there's any video or any creator that I'm gonna go to react to, let me know for sure. Appreciate you guys for stopping by for the live stream for today. I'm gonna try to do them more frequently on Mondays for damn sure. It is always a good time. It's always a good way to start the week by just reacting to some stuff, man. Getting some good content, getting the energy flowing for the week, starting that productivity, and yeah, I appreciate you for stopping by. If this is your first time watching my stream, I do a podcast every single Thursday at 7 o'clock Arizona time, so tap in with that for sure. Episode 199 this week, fellas. I'm looking forward to it very, very much. It'll be with my boys, so tap in with that for sure. Episode 200 coming next week. What a fucking milestone. I cannot wait to hit that for sure. I already have episode 200 and 201 planned, and that should be something that is definitely going to be very, 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 very interesting, I'd say. Very, very interesting. So tap in with that for sure. But yeah, like I said, tap in with the next podcast on Thursday. Leave a like on my YouTube shorts as well as my YouTube clips. I'm posting more. I'm trying to post every single day, so that is going to be the move for sure. And like I said, any videos, let me know. Other than that, yeah, tap in on Thursday. I'll leave you guys out for the podcast motto, even though we ain't doing a podcast. Fellas out here, man, we don't just work around here, man. We outwork. So make sure y'all working these motherfuckers because you know that I am. You know that my people are. And that's just how it is, man. Become part of the squad, man. That's all I got to say. Have a good night, fellas. Tap in on Thursday. And like I said, episode 199.